Welcome to Inquiry, a podcast geared towards students where we discuss all things related to tech, from school to industry.
My name is Annie.
And I'm Daniel, and together, we are your co-hosts.
Our team at Inquiry has been working hard to put together an 8-episode focus series titled Tech After High School. In each of these 8 episodes, we will be featuring various tech programs in Canadian schools, from varying computer science programs to biotechnology and biomedical engineering.
For today's episode, we are so excited to introduce Shkula Wardak. Shkula is a third-year computer science student at the University of Ottawa. Over the summer, she worked at Health Canada as a co-op student. When she's not studying, she's spending time outside in nature, tending to her numerous plants, or discovering new parts of the city on her bike. Thank you so much for joining us, Shkula. Why don't you start off by telling everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Daniel. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. Besides when I'm not studying and biking and all that jazz, I like taking pictures. I'm interested in photography. I dabble a little bit in interior design and hanging out with my friends, obviously. In terms of my career, I think with computer science, I'm really interested in the fields of data science, actually, as well as some mobile UI UX design. So that's sort of what I'm focusing on right now.
Okay, that sounds great to hear. So before breaking down your specific situation in detail, can you tell us a little bit more about the field of computer science as a general?
So with computer science, it's a pretty broad field, I would say. But in general, it pretty much breaks down to the study of computation and information. So that sounds quite fancy, but it's pretty much the design and creation of software systems for computers, for phones, for anything that you use that involves technology. There is some element of software that needs to be designed and created. And that's sort of what the field is about. So there are a bunch of different options to go into it. With computer science, there are a lot of applications, which includes sort of research and academia, but then also traditional software development at big companies, or even going into more of the data science or the financial technology spheres. So there's a lot in the field of computer science.
That sounds great. Is there a difference between computer science and software engineering or computer engineering?
Yeah, so actually this is a really popular question. But with computer science, generally computer scientists or people who do a computer science degree and people who do a software engineering degree generally end up in the same type of jobs in the sort of field of software development. I would say same with computer engineering to a degree. Computer engineering is a little bit different because they focus more on hardware instead of software. So they can end up in the same jobs, but generally, if they decide to work in hardware, they are able to, while computer science students and software engineering students don't necessarily or can't necessarily work in hardware as easily. But specifically between computer science and software engineering, like I said, they end up in the same jobs, but the degrees are a little bit different. And this changes depending on the school that you go to. But computer science is generally more theoretical, so it's a lot more focused on math and the sort of theoretical aspects of computer science, rather than software engineering, which is a lot more focused on application and actually creating software systems. A lot more of the design elements and the engineering elements go into that part. So that's sort of the main difference, I would say, between those two fields. One is more theoretical and then one is more application focused.
Oh, okay, cool. So can you tell us a bit more about the computer science program in specific at U Ottawa?
Yeah, of course. So at U Ottawa, there are a lot of different programs that you can sort of go into that involve computer science, but specifically the one that I'm in is the Bachelor of Science with Honors in Computer Science. So this is a 4-year program, and it requires you to do an honors project at the end. So basically, it covers all of the traditional CS courses that you would expect to take, a bunch of different languages, a bunch of different classes about algorithms and data structures and all that jazz. And at U Ottawa, it's offered both in English and in French, which is one of the cool things about going to U Ottawa is that you have the opportunity to take classes in either language. Um, and with the computer science degree, you're able to take minors, for example. This is one of the reasons that I ended up choosing this program is it does have a lot of electives, so it's quite easy to take a minor, even like in a complete different subject. For example, I know a lot of people who are doing minors in management, for example, or even minors in like some completely different field. So that's sort of the general overview of computer science at U Ottawa.
Okay, cool. So like when you take a minor, does that make your degree a year longer, or is there a certain amount of credits that you have to take in extra?
So yeah, actually, the thing about this is that, yeah, it doesn't make your degree longer necessarily. It depends on how well you plan it, to be honest. But minors are usually 30 credits out of your 120 of your degree. And with computer science, you have the opportunity, you have 30 credits of electives. So if you use all of your electives on that minor, then you can totally minor without taking any extra time for your degree.
Oh, okay, that sounds really good. Do all your programs come with co-op in the computer science field at U Ottawa?
Yeah, so all of them have a computer or a co-op option. Um, but the thing is, you don't necessarily need to take that option. So with computer science, I had to apply in second year for the co-op program. But there are some people who apply for it through OUAC and then basically just have to meet a GPA minimum that ensures their spot in the co-op program. But other than that, they all have a co-op option, which is really important. If you're in this field, I think you really need experience, and co-op is a really great way to get that experience.
That sounds great. What are some courses that you've taken in the past or that you are taking right now that are specific to this program?
So the vast majority of my courses actually are pretty, like at least in the second and third and fourth year, they get really specialized. In first year, you do take the sort of intro to computing courses. You take Python, you take Java, and then you do a lot of math. So math that relates specifically to computer science. So discrete math is a big one, discrete structures, that kind of thing. But then courses, for example, that I've taken that have helped me a lot in sort of the workplace include data structures and algorithms. That's a really important course. It is a pretty broad general overview of data structures and algorithms, but it's a pretty important one because it applies to a lot in the field. Intro to software engineering, that was one of my really favorite courses that I've taken so far because we got to build a mobile app, an Android app. So it was a really cool opportunity to work together in a group and sort of have that like building a project from scratch and then seeing it come to life. And then by the end of the course, you've built an app. So that's really cool. Other courses that I've taken, programming paradigms, that was a really good one. It basically explores programming paradigms that you wouldn't normally use in your day-to-day career, I think. So generally in the computer science field, object-oriented programming, that's sort of the big thing right now. But there are a lot of other paradigms that are really cool and interesting to learn about and are used in a bunch of different things. For example, functional programming, logic programming. I'm not going to get too into the details of it just because it's a little bit intense, but that's a really cool course that I've taken. But yeah, besides that, I think that like databases is another one. Overall, the courses have been really cool and they've helped me a lot in terms of like applying stuff to my co-op job. So that's been really interesting.
Okay, so what would you say were the hardest courses that you've had to take so far?
Ooh, interesting. I would say that Everything, like the courses that I'm taking right now are probably going to be the hardest that I'm going to take. But so far, um, I think the math ones are the ones that are people don't put as much focus on the math ones. I think math courses are really important in this degree because, like I was saying earlier, it's a really it focuses on sort of the theoretical aspects of computer science, and so having a good foundation of math and like your basic principles of discrete math, for example, are really, really important. So those are the courses where like they're not necessarily challenging as much as they just need a lot of patience and time to really take and work on them so that you actually understand the fundamentals. So I would say, yeah, the math is really important, math courses that you're going to take. And then the other course that I would say a big one that was probably a little bit difficult was Computer Architecture 1. So this is a computer engineering course, and as a computer science student, obviously I'm not used to looking at things from such a minute perspective. So with computer architecture, you're basically building a computer from the bottom up, using Boolean logic gates, and then building it from that. So it was quite different from what I was used to. And I think that coding in assembly and machine code, that was an interesting experience. I think most computer science students found it a little bit difficult just because it's not something that we're used to. And it did require a lot of time. I would say that out of all of them that I've taken so far, computer architecture was definitely one of the harder ones.
Oh, okay. Wow. Building a computer does seem very complicated.
Yeah.
For the math courses, would you say they're more math, for example, on the analysis side, like proofs, or is it more solving equations?
It's actually a combination of both. So there are quite a few math courses that you have to take. Calc 1, Calc 2, I would say, is definitely more just traditional solving. But then discrete math, so we take two different discrete maths courses. So discrete mathematics for computing, that's a first-year course, and then discrete structures. And both of those are very proofs heavy. And that sort of leans in more to traditional computer science math. The first year calc courses that you have to take, that's like after that, you don't really have to focus on that. But the proofs become really important past second and third and fourth year, or during second and third and fourth year, because everything sort of compiles onto that. Even courses right now, I'm taking like a fourth year course that definitely depends on my knowledge from second year that I had to take in my discrete structures class.
Oh, okay, cool. And just out of curiosity, what's your favorite programming language?
That's a good question. I think that because I'm sort of interested in data science, I think that Python has a special place in my heart, I think, because of its abilities in the field of data science. So I would definitely say that Python is my favorite.
Sounds great. As someone who's never really been in the computer field, when we come to courses, does the university offer a lot of programming language specific class, or is it more of a general view and then afterwards the student learn the language that they are interested in?
I would say it's more of a general view. The only courses where it's like language focused, I would say, are your intro classes, because your first one you learn Python, second one you learn Java, and then maybe programming paradigms because you learn quite a few languages in that class. But everything else is like generally focused on the theory and the fundamentals of CS rather than the actual languages themselves. So I would say definitely it's more of a general view. And a lot of classes, especially upper year classes, you're kind of free to use whatever languages you want to create your projects. It's a lot less strict on that because, once again, it's more on the focus is more on the fundamentals and actually completing projects rather than the actual languages themselves.
Oh, okay. So let's say there was a specific language you wanted to learn, you'd have to do it on your own.
Yeah, I would say so. There are some classes I would say, like upper year classes, for example. Um, I think the UI class definitely focuses heavy on JavaScript, for example. And then we do have a third year class, a CS class specifically that focuses on web development. So you learn web development languages. But generally, I would say if you do want to learn a language or a framework, it's probably best to do it on your own because the school doesn't really focus specifically on languages.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now I'd like to move on into the application process. What are the requirements in the application?
So I applied as an Ontario student. This is quite interesting because I didn't actually apply to computer science, but I think that this applies generally to most programs as an Ontario student if you're applying from Ontario. Um, the process is done on OUAC, which is the Ontario University Application Center. Um, so with computer science, based on what I've read online, the application or the grades that required for computer science range in the sort of mid 80s. The application process is pretty much all just done online. It's pretty simple. Just a few clicks of a button, you apply on OUAC, and then it's pretty seamless, I would say.
Sounds good. So, if I'm not mistaken, you said that grades in the mid 80s are something that's required to have a competitive application.
Yeah, so honestly, I would say like as computer science is getting more and more popular, the programs in this field are like they're getting a little bit more competitive, to be honest. So mid 80s I feel like is the like bare minimum at this point, to be honest. Over the course of the years, I'm sure that it's going to get higher and higher. But competitive, yes, I would say mid 80, mid to high 80s, I think would be ideal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Were there any supplementals in the application?
No. So I think that for this, for U Ottawa, I think the vast majority of courses or vast majority of programs don't require any sort of supplemental application. Like I said, you just apply super easy on OUAC, and that's pretty much it.
That sounds great. So, would you have any advice for students who are applying to this program?
So specifically in terms of the application process, once again, like there's not really much to it. But if you're applying to the CS program, you don't necessarily need to know anything about computer science. That's something that I actually found really interesting is that they teach the program to you as if you had no previous experience in computer science, which I think is really cool and really helpful. I mean, obviously, if you want to go out of your way to sort of learn the fundamentals or explore a little bit before you apply, that's really cool, especially if you want to figure out if this is the right program for you. But the one thing that I would say is to make sure that your math skills are solid. Like I said, math is pretty important, especially in the first few years of your degree. The fundamentals are really, really important. So it's pretty important, I would say, to have a solid understanding of math before you apply. And that's sort of pretty much the only thing that I would say, because everything else is pretty straightforward.
So, before we move on into the campus life aspect, I'd just like to go back to a point you mentioned. So, you said that you were previously a biomed student. What made
Yeah,
you make the switch to CS?
yeah, actually. So I did a whole year of biomed because I applied to that sort of out of high school. High school, I had taken science classes, chemistry classes, biology, all that jazz. I did sort of have the idea of going into medicine, so that was sort of something that I was thinking about, and that's why I had taken all those courses in high school. But after doing biomed for a year, not that it was a bad program, because I think it's a really good program for anybody who wants to do pre-med and wants to pursue a career in medicine, for example. Um, I just found that it wasn't really for me. It was very science heavy, very memorization heavy, lots of labs, chemistry labs, biology labs, all that. So I just didn't really think that it was for me. I don't think that it was something that I've envisioned myself doing in the future. I didn't really think that I wanted to be a doctor. So it was actually funny because I took a Python class in the winter of my first year. And I sort of just took it as an elective, kind of for fun, just to sort of see what it was about. And I thought that it would be a fun thing to do. And I sort of realized that it was a lot more enjoyable than my biology courses or my chemistry courses. I found that I enjoyed spending a lot more time on that course. So I sort of decided, I was like, I don't think I can see a future in a biomed degree. So I decided to make the switch. And I'm so glad that I did, because I have no regrets. I'm so happy in this program, and I'm so glad that I was able to do it.
Yeah, that sounds great. So outside of academics, how have you found your experience at U Ottawa?
I think that my experience at U Ottawa has been really good. I mean, as a commuter student, it has been a little bit different rather than students who live on campus or students who live near the school. But I think that with U Ottawa, your experience is pretty much as great or as boring as you make it. You kind of do have to go out of your way to do cool things, I think. As in terms of like campus life, it's definitely, there's a lot of opportunities to do cool things, to get involved in like clubs, and have all these experiences. But it's definitely on you to sort of find them, I would say. But yeah, I think that U Ottawa is a school where it's not super, super academic focused in the same way that a school, for example, like U of T is, but it's also not completely like party focused like other schools that exist. But yeah, I would say that it's definitely a really cool school. It's a good middle ground, I would say, for a lot of people, because you're able to have as much fun or as little fun as you want to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, as you said, that getting involved in clubs is super important, and you get to meet new people, and mostly people who have the same interests as you. So that's also a really great thing to do.
For sure, yeah.
So did you partake in any clubs?
Yeah, so the clubs that I sort of was like focused on, like in first year, I wish I had participated in a lot more clubs, because I didn't really. That was like one of the things that I wish I had done. But in second year, the clubs that I sort of were really into weren't necessarily like directly tied to my program. There was a few that were, but the first one being field hockey. So U Ottawa has a field hockey club, and it's not like a varsity sport or anything. We don't get any funding from the school, but we're just like people who like playing field hockey. And so that was a really cool opportunity to like hang out with people, especially from people from different programs. I think that was really important, because obviously every day you're going to school, you're seeing the same people in the same program, all that jazz. So it was nice to be able to talk to people who were in nursing or in social science or all these other different programs, and also hang out and be able to like play a sport that you really like. So that was a really cool opportunity. I met a lot of cool people. So I'm so glad that I played field hockey with them. In terms of other clubs, there were a few that I was sort of involved in. Obviously, as the school year gets busy, it's harder to participate, but the Women in Science and Engineering Club, that's a really cool one as well. They do a lot of events and stuff to sort of focus on creating a cool atmosphere for women who are involved in science and engineering programs. So I really enjoyed that. And then also I was sort of involved in the U Ottawa's Mars Rover Club. We actually have, U Ottawa has like a lot of cool robotics / like rocketry, all that jazz clubs, engineering clubs basically, and they're really cool. I wish I had participated a little bit more, but it was a really cool experience to see what they were all doing, because it gives you a chance to like apply the stuff that you're learning at school. So the Mars Rover Club, for example, we had a hardware team, we had a software team, we had people who were more focused on the science side, and then people who were more focused on the engineering side, and we even had people who we're focused on marketing and stuff, right, and budgeting on all that jazz. So it was really cool to see the combination of all these people from all these different fields to work together for our one goal of like creating a Mars rover that we would hopefully be able to send to like competitions and stuff.
Okay, that's so cool. So if we move back into the academics, would you say that your program is really challenging?
I wouldn't say it's really challenging. I think that as long as you're willing to put in the time, then it is not super, super difficult. I would say like there are some things that are required. Like I mentioned before, it might be a little bit more difficult if you don't have a solid understanding of math or those sort of fundamentals. But I think overall, it's not. It's definitely not rocket science. So, yeah, I would say that definitely doable, especially coming from me as somebody who didn't really have any previous computer science experience before I switched into the program. So I would say even coming from me, it's very manageable.
That's good to hear. So we briefly touched upon your co-op experience this summer. How has your experience been with finding co-ops through your program?
So U Ottawa is actually like a really good school for this. Our co-op program, I would say, is like pretty comprehensive, pretty good, especially because we're in a semi-big city, a big enough city where there is a lot of opportunities, particularly in government. I know that in the software development field, not everybody wants to be in government, but I think it's a really cool place to start. So with the co-op program at U Ottawa, it is a program where you do have a lot of support. I would say the co-op office has a lot of, or like the Co-op Navigator specifically, is basically the program that we use to be able to find jobs. We put our resume on there, and then employers are able to put their job postings on the Co-op Navigator. The way that the U Ottawa Co-op program works is that once you apply through that navigator, the employers are then interview you, and the interviews are all done like in a normal setting. They would be done on campus, so all of the employees come to, or like the employers come to U Ottawa. So it's a really easy, like they make it really easy for you to get a job, I would say. Specifically in this field, the placement rate for a co-op is like, I believe it's 95% or more. So the vast majority of people get jobs within their field. So I would say that the co-op program at U Ottawa is like really good. There's a lot of job opportunities, and obviously we're not necessarily like a big name school in terms of or in the field of computer science, but I think that it's still quite like it's a really good way. Co-op is a really good way of getting sort of experience that's really important in the software development field.
Oh, okay, that sounds great. And 95% of placement is really, really high.
Yeah. I'm not sure how it is for other programs specifically, but I know computer sciences has a pretty high placement rate.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in the high placement rates out of the various programs at U Ottawa. So what sort of co-op experiences have you had in the past?
So I've done one co-op placement so far. With the computer science program specifically, typically you do anywhere from 3 to 5 co-op terms. So my first one was at Health Canada, and I was a junior technical analyst there. So my team specifically, we were working on this website that basically directs anybody who works within Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada. So it directs them to any IT help that they needed. So basically we updated web content on the site. We created web pages. We also like created reports and quality assurance reports, testing reports, all that. Everything else that sort of relates to the testing process of software development. And so yeah, that was my co-op experience this summer. Obviously, it was a little bit different than usual because of COVID. So I was doing my work remotely. My work sent me a laptop, and the interaction that I had with like my coworkers and my teams was done on MS Teams and through email and stuff. So yeah, quite an interesting experience for my first co-op term. Hopefully in the future it'll be a little bit different, but I think that overall it was a really good experience, especially for my first co-op term. I'm glad that I was able to work for a company or work for Health Canada because they were very supportive in terms of the whole COVID situation, and they were very helpful because they helped me learn a lot, whether that be technical elements or more like soft skills that I would have learned. So yeah, overall a really good experience.
Yeah, that sounds like a really fun time. So we've talked a lot about the program. I'd like to touch upon a bit what happens after the program. So what sort of jobs do grads typically go for?
So this sort of goes back to like what I was saying earlier. Computer science is a very broad field. I would say the two main things are either you go into academia and research, or you go into a very traditional software development role at like a tech company, for example. So I think that the vast majority of people do go into the tech field. They just work for a tech company. But even within that, there are a lot of different options. Like I mentioned earlier, fintech is an option, data science, and then there are very specific different fields, that sort of relate to other fields. So this is what I mean by that is that tech, you can go into a tech development role at a tech company, or you can do tech development or like software development in the context of, for example, health sciences. Like you could work at a hospital creating their software infrastructure, or you could do like there was a lot of different options for computer science because technology is pretty much everywhere. Every single job that you could ever imagine has some sort of software that goes with it, and with that there needs to be somebody who's making that software. So yeah, typically most people do go into tech development roles, but on the academia side, there's a lot of opportunities to sort of do your master's in computer science or your PhD, and go into research. So big fields in research right now are like machine learning and artificial intelligence. Those are really big ones that we're looking into right now. And so definitely it's a pretty broad field in that if you do want to stay at school, you can. But then if you do want to go and work in the industry, then you can do that too.
So from my understanding that since technology has expanded into pretty much every single domain of the job market, there's like so many options that CS students can choose from once they graduate.
Yeah, exactly.
So with all these options, where do you see yourself headed after graduation?
That's a really good question. I'm still not 100% sure, to be honest. I think that it would be cool to work in the data science field. So data science is computer science, but it's a little bit more math focused. It's a little bit more statistics focused. And so I think that would be a really cool opportunity. I think I would see myself working at a private company in industry in a traditional sort of tech role. Although I think if I ever sort of see any opportunities of working in a more specific role, I think that would be interesting. But yeah, definitely traditional tech field, I think, is where I see myself. I think in the future, possibly. The thing with computer science is that, or like the thing with the tech industry is that there's a lot of people who code, but then as you spend more and more years in industry, as you get more and more senior, you do a lot less coding and a lot more management if you so choose. So I think that it would be interesting to move more into the management field as I get older. I am actually considering doing an MBA in the future to sort of go into more of a management, product management, project management role at a private company. So I think that that's sort of where I see myself in the future. But yeah.
That sounds great. So you mentioned something that brought up my interest. So you said that coding is evolving, and I'm aware that there's a lot of new languages that come out every year. And how do you keep up with all these new languages that are coming up, and maybe job positions that require experience in these new languages?
That's actually a really good question. When you're a software developer, honestly, it's just constantly learning is really, really important. I think that that's sort of one of the things that you acknowledge when you go into this field, is that because it's a field that's ever evolving, you're always going to need to be learning new software. You're going to be learning new frameworks, new ways to do things, new paradigms. So I think that to keep up with it, I mean, it's sort of part of the job description. You do sort of have to do that, especially as you're applying to different jobs in different markets. I think that as long as you have the drive to be able to learn new things, I think that keeping up with it shouldn't be that big of an issue, I think, because as a computer science student, you're sort of taught to constantly be learning. So as after you graduate and as you start working, you're constantly just going to sort of keep up with learning new technologies and all of that. So you're able to sort of keep up with the field.
That sounds great. So this wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much, Shkula, for coming on and having a chat with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that I was able to talk about my experience as a computer science student.
And that's a wrap for today's episode featuring Shkula, which is part of Inquiry's focus series Tech After High School. We hope you enjoyed. Thanks for tuning in and having us be a part of your journey to code your future.
Make sure to follow us on social media to stay in the loop and for a chance to have your questions answered in our next episode. See you then.